Were you alive when the war started? If yes, type, "Yes, I was alive" in the comments. Let's see who was there. After this video, watch 2 or 3 more long videos on our channel or on YouTube. You may receive good news in 2 days. If you do, come back and comment, "We receive good news." Like and share this video with your friends. Let's get started. January 17th, 1942. The Pacific Ocean southwest of Tokyo Bay. The water was black as ink, cold enough to bite deep. Lieutenant Commander Tyrone Henderson stood on the conning tower of the USS Swordfish, scanning the horizon through salt-caked binoculars. The submarine rocked softly in the swell. Her diesel engines pulsed a low steel heartbeat into the winter dark around him. The night closed in with heavy silence. No stars, no moon. Only the faint glow of stirred plankton trailing behind them. Henderson's breath clouded in the frozen air. Somewhere ahead, beyond the curtain of darkness, lay the Japanese home islands. Behind him, 3,000 miles of hostile ocean cut the Swordfish off from Pearl Harbor, still burning from the strike that had pulled America into war 6 weeks earlier. The young captain felt that distance like solid weight pressing on his chest. Below deck, in a tight navigation room no bigger than a coffin, Lieutenant Junior Grade William Bill Fitzgerald bent over his charts with the focus of a man threading a needle in a storm. But Fitzgerald wasn't threading anything. He was lost. Completely, disastrously lost. The navigator's fingers still shook from torpedo juice stolen from the engine room 2 hours before. He drew unsure lines across salt-stained paper. The harsh alcohol, drained from torpedoes and filtered through stale bread, had felt smart at the time. Warmth against the deep cold of patrol. A short escape from the crushing steel tube that ruled their lives. Now, as numbers blurred and calculations refused to make sense, Fitzgerald knew he'd made a grave mistake. By dead reckoning, they should be nearing their patrol zone off the Bonin Islands. But the depth readings said otherwise. The seabed was rising far too fast. The water was far too shallow. What Bill Fitzgerald didn't know, what he couldn't know through drink and pour charts, was that his error had pushed the USS Swordfish north-northwest, off course, and straight toward the most guarded military site in the Japanese Empire. They were sailing directly toward Etajima, the famed naval academy where Japan shaped its officers, where Yamamoto himself once walked as a student, where the core of Japan's sea power trained in waters seen as untouchable, sacred as holy ground. The Swordfish was about to make the seaborne version of drunkenly parachuting into the Pentagon. The Imperial Japanese Naval Academy at Etajima was more than a military school. It stood for decades of carefully shaped war thinking. It was a place where young men were turned into tools of Bushido and modern sea combat. Founded in 1888 during the Meiji Restoration, it rose as Japan opened itself to Western military methods while holding tight to samurai values. Etajima became the furnace where East and West fused into something deadly. The men trained there had crushed the Russian fleet at Tsushima in 1905, earning Japan respect as a global naval power. They later planned and carried out the Pearl Harbor attack with ruthless skill. The waters around the academy were seen as forbidden, guarded by patrol boats, nets, air scouts, and the firm belief that no enemy would ever dare approach the sacred core of Japan's naval strength. But the Americans knew none of this. The maps given to submarine captains in early 1942 were painfully poor, built on old surveys and rough guesses. The Pacific War was only 6 weeks old, and the United States was still shaken, still making it up as they went. Men were being sent into danger with tools barely fit for the job. Henderson and his crew knew they were hunting shipping routes. They knew to stay unseen, strike fast, and escape. They did not know they were about to rise inside Japan's most protected military ground. At 0347 hours, Henderson ordered the submarine to surface and recharge. It was normal patrol routine. Stay under by day, surface at night to pull in fresh air and power. The Swordfish burst through the surface in a rush of white water, her tower rising like a whale taking breath. Henderson climbed up at once, scanning the dark. What he saw froze his blood. Lights. Not scattered fishing lamps or a far-off town glow, but ordered lights. Pier lights. Building lights. Clean shapes that spoke of a major military base. And they were close, far too close. He could see buildings cut against the fading night, ships lined in perfect rows, cranes and docks standing bare and sharp. His thoughts raced and landed on one truth. They had drifted into a Japanese naval base. Fitzgerald sobered instantly, the way only a man facing total ruin can. He ran the numbers again, checked the coast through the periscope, and felt his guts sink as the truth locked in. They were not near the Bonin Islands. They were in Hiroshima Bay, between Honshu and Shikoku, inside the most defended waters in Japan. And it was about to worsen. The sky was lightening with dawn. In 90 minutes, maybe less, the academy would wake. Cadets would march out. Officers would step forward for their morning inspections. Patrol boats would soon begin their daily sweeps. The swordfish would be seen at once, and every gun within 10 miles would turn toward her. They would be stuck in shallow water, unable to dive deep, unable to run far. Trapped like a rat inside a steel cage built by their own drunken navigation. Henderson decided in 3 seconds. They couldn't dive. The water was too shallow, too crowded, and any movement below would give them away as surely as staying up top. They couldn't fight. One submarine against a full military complex meant certain death. The only choice was to run on the surface. Engines howling at full power, racing for open sea before daylight exposed them to every watching eye that he shouted orders down the voice tube to the engine room. The crew slammed the diesels to full output. Thick black smoke poured from the exhaust as the swordfish lunged ahead. She cut a bright white scar through the dark water, charging toward the channel that led to freedom. They ran against the rising sun for 47 minutes. The USS Swordfish carried out one of the boldest escapes in submarine history. They tore across waters that should have been impossible to cross. Past moored training ships whose crews slept on. Beneath shore guns whose crews were only starting breakfast. Through channels marked on Japanese charts as forbidden. Places where no unknown vessel should ever be. The submarine's dark shape melted into the pre-dawn haze. Her bow wave lost in the natural chop of the bay. Henderson stood stiff on the conning tower, praying to remain unseen, while silently drafting the unreal report he might have to write if they lived. At 0434 hours, just as the eastern sky began to glow with true light, a lookout at a southern post noticed something wrong on the water. A ripple. A shape that did not belong. He lifted his binoculars and felt his heart freeze. A submarine. An enemy submarine inside Adajima Bay. Impossible. Yet there it was, already 1,000 meters away and pulling farther with every second. He reached for the alarm bell, hands shaking so badly he could barely grasp a cord. When the sound finally rang out, a thin, weak rattle, it felt painfully small for what he had just seen by the time the alarm moved through the base command chain, by the time officers grasped the impossible report and started shouting orders, by the time the first patrol boat slipped its lines and shore guns turned toward the sighting. The Swordfish had already crossed into deep water. Henderson yelled the dive order. 70 seconds later, the submarine slid under the surface and dropped toward the safety below, leaving only a churn of broken water behind. Japanese depth charges fell 20 minutes too late, exploding where the Swordfish no longer was, throwing up white towers of foam that did nothing except wake every sleeping cadet at the academy. Japanese high command received the news with rage and disbelief. An American submarine had entered Adajima itself, surfaced within view of the sacred academy, and escaped without a single hit. The meaning was shocking. If American boats could break these defenses by mistake or on purpose, then nowhere was truly safe. The shock rolled through the officer corps like a blast wave. The breach of holy ground, the sudden sense of weakness, cracked something deep in the naval mind. Emergency meetings followed. Patrols were tripled. Nets were strengthened. But the harm was done. The belief in perfect home water safety had been destroyed by one drunk navigator's error to end aboard the Swordfish, racing south toward safer seas. The first rush of relief faded into a strange mix of shame and dark humor. Bill Fitzgerald sobered fully. his hand steady now that survival seemed real, and faced Henderson's cold anger with the calm of a man who knew his career was likely over. Henderson's report, written 3 days later, was quiet and chilling. He listed the navigation error in dry language, detailed the escape with strict precision, and almost casually noted that they had carried out the deepest look into Japanese home waters yet. He did not mention the torpedo juice. Some details, he decided, did not belong in official history. American Naval Command reacted in stages, moving from anger to amazement to something close to awe. The first urge to court-martial Fitzgerald faded, as leaders realized his mistake had achieved what no planned mission could. He had shown that Japan's home waters were not sealed, that nerve and chance could defeat even the strongest defenses, that the enemy was not untouchable in its most sacred places. The Swordfish had stumbled into a propaganda victory, proving by accident that American submarines could go anywhere, strike anywhere, appear in the heart of the enemy's strongest waters, and vanish like ghosts. The story quietly spread among submarine crews as proof that luck favored the bold, or at least the dangerously drunk. What neither side fully grasped then was how deeply this single event would shape Japanese naval strategy. The breach of Edo-jima forced a shift of defenses, pulling patrol ships and aircraft away from forward battle zones to guard home waters that were never meant to need guarding. It planted a seed of fear in Japanese command thinking, a constant doubt that Americans could appear anywhere, that no area was ever fully safe. The cadets at Edo-jima who saw the submarine's wake that morning never forgot the message. Confidence without watchfulness led to disaster. The enemy could do the unthinkable. War humbled the proud. Some of those cadets lived to command ships at Midway 6 months later, where the same failure to imagine risk and the same overconfidence would cost Japan the turning point of the war. Wild Bill Fitzgerald never drank torpedo juice again. The shock burned the habit out of him completely. He went on to guide the Swordfish through 19 more patrols, building a record of perfect navigation that became legend in the silent service. His mistake at Edo-jima stayed with him for life, but it also changed him. He became obsessed with precision, checking every number again and again, staying fully sober on duty, carrying that January morning like a lifelong punishment. In 1944, his navigation led the Swordfish through a minefield off the Philippines that others judged impossible, saving the boat and crew through calculations so exact there was no room for error. The drunk navigator became the man who could thread needles in hurricanes, redeemed by the same mistake that nearly ruined him. Henderson never formally reported the torpedo juice. But the Navy was not blind. New rules about alcohol quietly entered submarine regulations. Torpedo systems were redesigned to make fuel harder to steal. The silent service built a culture of sobriety shaped in part by the Swordfish's wrong turn. A tale passed among crews as dark humor, warning that war punished carelessness with death, but sometimes, without reason, rewarded it with miraculous survival. The deeper truth, the one neither American pride nor Japanese anger fully captured, was this. The Edo-jima incident exposed the core difference between the two naval ways of thinking. The Japanese had built a world of perfect order, where tradition, training, and territory were sacred, where certain places were guarded by belief as much as by weapons. The idea of intrusion felt unthinkable. The Americans, by contrast, moved forward through improvisation and disorder, making massive mistakes and somehow living through them, turning failure into success by sheer refusal to quit. The drunk navigator's mistake was purely American. Reckless, undisciplined, accidental, strangely brilliant, and effective not because of careful planning, but because of an instinct to survive amid self-made chaos. There is a photograph taken decades after the war. It shows Fitzgerald and 3 surviving Swordfish crewmen standing on a dock in Hawaii. They are old by then, white-haired and worn by time, holding a bottle of fine whiskey they saved for 40 years, still sealed. The caption says they are marking the anniversary of the Edo-jima escape, remembering the friends who never came home from other patrols. Fitzgerald holds the bottle, but does not drink. In his eyes lives the ghost of that January morning, the memory of black water and closing distance, then escape. The knowledge that his worst error became his defining moment. The bottle stays unopened even in the picture. Some lessons are too strong to ever water down. The waters off Adajima are calm now, crossed by ferries and fishing boats. The academy still stands, changed into a museum, where visitors walk halls once used by Yamamoto. The guns are silent. The patrol boats are gone. The war fades into history. But on January mornings, when fog settles thick and the sea turns black as ink, locals sometimes tell a story of a ghost submarine that appeared and vanished in a single breath. The American boat that broke sacred waters and escaped untouched. The drunk navigator who stumbled into legend. They tell it with quiet respect and lingering disbelief, acknowledging a truth the war taught both sides. Courage and luck are often impossible to separate. That mistakes can turn into victories, and that history is shaped as much by chance as by intent. The real ending is this: freedom, democracy, abundance. Those ideas meant nothing in the instant Henderson shouted the dive order, and the swordfish slid under the sea. What mattered was improvisation, survival, the power to turn a fatal mistake into a miraculous escape. Perhaps that skill itself was the clearest sign of American strength. Not factories or carrier fleets, but messy creativity that could steer through disaster. The refusal to accept that any place was off limits. The drunk navigator's accidental proof that boldness could break any wall. The Japanese built perfection and strict order. The Americans built room for failure and the ability to win anyway. In the end, in a long war of industry and endurance, the side that could live through its own errors outlasted the one that could not afford them. Wild Bill Fitzgerald's wrong turn showed that truth before anyone fully saw it. One drunken calculation at a time. Racing through sacred waters in winter darkness. Escaping the impossible because no one had told him it could not be done.